Hi everyone, welcome you all. So in the today's video, we are going to see how we can use fixtures in Cypress. So fixtures are basically a files which can have some data and which we can use it in our tests. For example, if you look at here Cypress automation folder structure, we have a special folder called fixtures. So the fixtures folder contains the test data files and which contains some test data and which we are going to use in our test. So let me show you how we can create test data files and how we can use the data in our testing. So we can also have different type of files here, which will accept JSON format, JavaScript format, or text format, or CSV, JPG, whatever files which we have, we can keep inside the fixtures and we can use those files as a test data in our test cases. Now let me show you an example. So here I have taken one small file orangehrm.json, and this is a fixture file which is created inside the fixtures folder. Now all the fixtures files should be part of the fixtures folder. And because our automation Cypress will automatically recognize the files which are there in the fixtures folder. Now if I just look at this file, we have orangehrm.json and which contains some data like username, password, and then expected. So now I'm going to use this data in our test. So for that, I'm taking one application. Let's take Orange HRM demo application. And here I'm going to use the data to perform the login. So whatever data I mentioned here in the fixture file, I will pass the data here. I can say admin and then admin123. And once you pass this data to this application, and if the successfully done, so then we can verify this particular message is part of here or not. So this PIM is displayed or not, we can verify. Okay, so let us see how we can do this. And this data I'm going to pass username, password, and if you pass this username and password, my expected should be PIM. So this text should be present in the target page if the login is successful. All right, so now let us try to create a test case for that. So for that, I have created fixtures.cy.js. So this is a JavaScript file which is created, and there are two different approaches which we have. And we can also directly access the data from the fixture file, or we can create an hook and that will get the data from the fixture file. So this we will see later. First, we will see how we can access the data from the fixture file and use it in your test. So I have created one describe block, and inside this, there is one more block called it block. Now let me try to automate something here. So first thing, we need to launch your application. So for that, I can say cy.visit, and inside this specify the application URL. Let me launch my application. So this is our application. Let me log out from this. Okay, so this is my application. Let me copy this and go back to your VS Code editor and then specify the URL of application. So once it is launched, this URL, and then let us interact with the username, password, and then click on the sign in and so on. So first of all, let me interact with this element. If I just go back and go to your application, inspect this element and username, go to selector hub, and here you can say this is a relative CSS selector. Now I'm going to use in your locator. I can say cy.get, and this is our element, and this is our CSS element, and dot send keys, dot type. So here I'm passing the value hard coded. So later I will show you how we can get this data from the fixture file. So for now, I'm just hard coding this data. And similarly, let's get the element of password. Inspect this password, and this is the password element. Get this element here. And inside this password, I'm just passing the value. Let's say admin123. And after that, we need to click on the login. So let me inspect this login, and this is the CSS locator for it. Then cy.get and specify that element and dot perform the click action. Okay, so now it is done. So once you successfully log in, we need to verify something, right? So first of all, let me log in admin123, click on the login. And once you log in into application, we need to verify this particular PIM is displayed or not. So inspect this PIM element. And this is a relative CSS locator for that element. Let me get this and go back and get that element cy.get. And this is the element and in which we are going to validate the text. So in this, I'm going to use one assertion, which is should have dot text. And this is my assertion, have dot text. What is the text we are expecting here is PIM we are expecting. So this is a assertion. All right. So normally this is how we can write the test script. So we have hard coded everything. So URL, and then we pass the username, we pass the password, then click on the submit button. And then after successfully login, we are verifying this message, right? So let me just try to execute this. I'm trying to execute only this one for now. And once it is successfully executed, then we will see how we can capture this data from the Fixture file. All right. Now save this and open the terminal and npx Cypress open. This will open Cypress application. Select the end-to-end testing, start. Now here I'm running the test Fixtures. So now it is started execution. So it is launching my application. And once it is successfully launched, then it will provide username and password. All right, now it is providing username and password successfully. Click on the submit and then my test is got passed. Now we are expecting same thing, PIM, right? So now we will see how we can capture the data from the Fixture file. So far we have just hard coded the data here, right? So this data and also here this one. So these three values I want to capture from the JSON file, which is basically Fixture. So orangehrm.json. Here this username and password and this is expected. So these three details we need to capture. So for that, what we need to do is, so here after launching your application, so to get the data from the Fixture, we need to use one method called cy.fixture. cy.fixture. And here we specify the file name. So what is the file name is orangehrm. So the extension is optional. So if you want to specify the extension, you can directly say orangehrm.json. Or even though if you're not specify the extension, this will automatically find that particular file. So orangehrm. And once we get this file, so we need to add something called then. So in the orangehrm is a file which contains some data, right? So that particular data we have to capture into some variable. So here we need to write one arrow function like this. And we need to pass this. We need to capture the data from this file into a variable. So that I can specify here. Let's say data. Now, whatever data we have in this orangehrm Fixture file, we are getting the entire data into this variable. And once we get this data into this, now we keep everything in part of this particular block, Fixture block. So now this particular data we are going to use to access the actual data. Suppose we go to the JSON file. So username is one data, password and expected. So these are the keys and along with the value, because the JSON format, which we have a keys and value pair. So now by using this data, we can access this. Now we can, instead of hard coding this data, simply what you can do is data dot username. So now this data is what? From the orangehrm, whatever it captured the data, which is there in this file, in this particular variable. And now from this variable, we are accessing username. And that is a key. And same thing, password also we can say data dot password. So these two values are actually coming from Fixture file. Now in the validation also, instead of hard coding this data, when you pass this data, what is your expected is, that is also part of your test data file. Here, this is our expected PIM. So this we need to access. So here, simply say data dot expected. So this is how we can parameterize the data from the Fixture file. Simply what we can do is we have to write one method cy.fixture and specify the name of the file dot then whatever data we have in this file, we capture entire data into the particular variable and we are passing into the arrow function. And inside this block, we will capture actual data from this variable, like say data.username, data.password, and then validation message also we are capturing from the JSON file. So this is how we can capture the data from the Fixture file. All right, so now let us try to execute and see. I'm saving the file, then see the execution one more time. Rerun it. So this time it will take the data from the fixture file. I think this has got saved. All right. So now it is starting my application. All right. Now my page is got launched. Now you can just look at this. My data is actually coming from fixture file. So now my assertion is got passed. Perfect. Okay. So this is how we can capture the data from the fixture file and use it in your test. Fine. So here, what exactly we are doing is we are getting the data from the fixture file, which is actually in the JSON format, and we are directly using in your test script. Suppose if this particular data is required in multiple tests. Okay, suppose I have written only one it block, one test I have written. Suppose if the same data is required in some other test or some other it blocks, so then what you can do is we have to repeat this step multiple times, right? So instead of doing that, we can also create a hook method, or you can say hook block, where exactly we load the fixture file and have the data, and that we can reuse in every it block. So what I will do is, let me just comment this. So this time I'm going to write one hook. Okay, so we can say access with, I think we already created that. Okay, so access through the hook for multiple it blocks. For multiple it blocks. Suppose if I want to use the same data from the same file in multiple blocks or multiple tests, then instead of writing the same code in every it block, we can just separate them in the hook block. So before writing the it block, I'm going to write one hook here. What is that? I can say before. This will execute only once before starting all the it blocks. All right. So in this before, I'm writing one arrow function. So in this, I'm going to load my fixture file. So how we can load it? Simple cy.fixture. Again, same command. cy.fixture and specify the name of the file. I say orange HRM file. And this file, once you all right. So once you created your before hook block, so here we are loading the fixture file, and whatever data which is present in this particular fixture file, we are capturing that into the variable again. And this is a arrow function. So this is a arrow function which we need to implement. So inside this, what you can do, whatever data we have captured into the variable, I'm assigning that data in some other variable called user data equal to data. And this user data we should able to access in another it blocks. So we need to make that as a global. For that, I will define a simple variable called let user data. So now this is a global variable, and we are assigning the data into the variable by using this before block. And now this is ready for all other it blocks. Suppose if you want to use this data variable in another it block, you can simply use it. Now we have already loaded fixture file and the data is available in the user data variable. Now how we can use it in our actual test? Again, same thing. We no need to load anything. Just get this code like this. Get this code and then paste it over here. And we are just launching the application, and we no need to load any fixture directly. We can interact with these elements. Just launching the application and getting the username, and here user data. So this is actual variable, right? We already written the before block in which we already capture the data into the variable, that is user data. So this user data we have to refer here, because before method which is already loaded everything from the JSON file. Simple. So in the actual it block, we are not loading the fixture file. For that, we have created a separate before block, which is basically a hook, which will execute only once before executing all it blocks. Okay. So this is another approach. Suppose if you want to use this data in multiple it blocks, first we need to load this JSON file or fixture file by using this before block, and then you can refer this variable in multiple it blocks. So this will also do the same thing. Now let me save and execute. Now again, it is launching my page. Now we can see here, it is getting the data from the same file and my assertion is got passed here. Okay. So this is how we can parameterize the data into the test by using Fixture file. Okay. So we can just specify the data in the Fixture file in the JSON format. And then we can use the same data. We can parameterize the same data in our test. So if you have only one single test, we can directly load the Fixture file inside the test and we can use the data. Or if you want to use this data in multiple tests, then you can first write a before hook and where you can just load the data and then use this variable in another it blocks. So in this example, we have just seen how we can pass the only one set of data. So we have just verified the login is successful or not with this particular valid credentials. Suppose I want to test the same thing with multiple sets of data. So I want to test the login with the multiple sets of data. And two things we need to do. So we need to add some more data in the Fixture file. So along with this, we need to add some more data like multiple username and multiple passwords. And at the same time, we need to also repeat this test multiple times with different sets of data. And that is basically called as a data-driven testing. The test is driven by the data. Now we'll see how we can achieve this. So how we can add multiple data sets in the JSON file, which is a Fixture file. And based on the data, how many times we can repeat this, how we can repeat the same test with multiple sets of data. So that I'm going to show you in another example. So let me just close this. So I already have one more file. You can look at here, orangehrm2.json. So here I have mentioned multiple sets of data. You can see this is actually JSON array. So JSON array and which contains a multiple data. So this is one data set, this is a second data set, and the third data set. So the first one is valid username and valid password. And then our expected is PIM. After successful login, we need to verify this. In the second data set, I'm passing invalid username and valid password. So the login should be failed. If the login should be failed, that means we are expecting invalid credential message on the login page itself. And here in the third input, I'm passing valid username and invalid password. Again, I'm expecting invalid credentials on the login page. It should not be successful. So when you pass valid data, I'm expecting PIM. That means login is successful. When you pass invalid data, login should not be successful. And also I'm expecting invalid credentials. That means when you pass invalid data, if you get invalid credential message, that means your test is got passed. How? Because we are passing the invalid data. When you pass invalid data, test should not be successful. Then my test is got passed, right? This is a negative testing. Even similarly, in the third input also, when you pass invalid data, login should not be successful. Then my test is got passed. So this is our expected. Now this is actual test data, which we have mentioned. Multiple input, 3 different type of sets of data I have taken here. Now let us see how we can write the test script and how we can capture this entire data in the test script and how we can repeat the test multiple times with multiple sets of data. Okay, now let us see that. So for that, I have already created one file, data-driven test.cy.js. Let us try to implement this. So here I have a describe block and there is it block. So inside the it block, we have to write our script. Okay, so inside the if block, first of all, what we need to do is we need to first load the Fixture file. Okay, so we need to load the Fixture file. How to load the Fixture file? I say cy.fixture. cy.fixture. And what's the name of the Fixture file is orangehrm2. orangehrm2. So extension is optional. If you just keep JSON, that is also fine. If you don't put the JSON also, no problem. So this is our orange hrm2. This is our Fixture file. And how to load it? So cy.fixture and then, so we use then, right? So then, so we need to write one arrow function here. So that is an arrow function we need to write. In the then, we have to write one arrow function like this. Now we need to pass. So whatever the data which is there in this Fixture file, we are getting the entire data into some variable. So here I'm saying data. Okay, so I'm getting the entire data from this into the variable. Now by using this variable, I can access the data from the fixture file. All right, but this time we have multiple sets of data. So not only single set, we have a multiple sets of data. So we need to iterate. For every data input, we have to repeat multiple times. We have to iterate the loop, which will capture every data in every time. For that, we have to use something called, once we have taken this data, inside this, we have to write data. In the data, we have to repeat multiple times because we need to get multiple data inputs. Data dot for each loop we have to use for each. And here we will use one more variable called, let's say, user data. And we need to write one more arrow function. Now what happens here is, so from the fixture, we are getting entire data into the variable. So now this data contains 3 sets of data. Now we need to iterate each and every set by using data dot for each, because the data is available in the data variable and 3 sets of data is there. So for every data input, we have to repeat multiple times. So every data input from the data. So what is the first input here? This one, username and password expected. This is the valid data that comes under the user data. And this user data we have to use in your script. Once it is completed, the next round of execution from this data, it will capture another set of data and again store into the user data. Okay, so it is going to work like this, guys. So let me show you a simple example. You can understand this. Okay, so we already captured the data into the, let's say this is my JSON file. So from the JSON file, we already captured the entire data into the data variable. Now here, 3 inputs are there. We have 3 different sets of data we have. Now what we are exactly doing here is, what for each loop will do from this data, first it will capture the first data into the user data. That is a one. So now this particular user data we have to use in your script. Inside this block, this is actually looping block. And once it is done, in the next round, it will capture the second input data to the user data. Third round, it will capture the third input to the user data. And now this input we have to pass into your automation script. So now let us try to implement the script. So how to implement the script? Again, we have to just copy the same thing. So we already done it right in the fixtures. Let me copy this part and go back, then paste it over here. And one more thing. So here we are just getting the data and passing the data into the fields, right? But before that, we should also launch our application only once, right? So once we launch the application, and before repeating this data, here I will launch the application, cy.visit, cy.visit, and here I will keep the application URL. So let me log out from application. Okay, now this is application URL. Okay, so we launch your application only one time, but this data we are getting. So from user data, from the user data, we have to access username and password. So this user data, we have to use this particular user data. We have to use it here and also here. And after that, we are clicking the submit. So once it is done, what happens? If the data is valid, then it will be successfully logged in, right? And then what we are expecting? We are expecting PIM message once it's successfully logged in. So that also we need to validate. As soon as you pass this first data input, user data.username, user data.password, after clicking on the login, we are going to verify something. So what we need to verify that PIM is present or not, we need to verify. And that also we already done, right? So let me capture that validation part. So this is the validation, we already done it. So let me get it from here. So this is a validation. But when we have to do this validation, so if the login is successful, and then only this element is available, the PIM element is available, and then text will be verified, right? If the login is not successful, this element is not present, right? So that we need to handle. So what we need to do is here, if, okay, if this particular user data.username user data dot username equal to admin. This is a valid credentials, right? And this user data dot password, equal to admin123. This is also valid. Then what should happen here is this should happen. This validation should be happen. We need to keep inside the if block. So why we need to keep inside the if block? Because once you successfully submitted, if your data is valid, login will be successful. Here we are verifying if the data is this one, then login is successful, then this assertion should pass. And when this assertion will verify, if the data is valid, then only you will get the element, that is a PIM after successful login. Suppose if you are passing invalid data here, that in that case, if condition will not match, then what will happen? If the if condition is not happen, if condition is not satisfied, then what happens is you will get invalid message. For example, I'm giving some invalid data. Click on the login. So now what happens here? You will get this invalid credentials. So this message we need to validate. This invalid credentials message we need to validate. So how we can validate that invalid credentials? Else. In the else block, we need to validate. So if the data is valid, then we are expecting PIM is there or not. Okay, because if the data is valid, it will successfully log in, right? So once you successfully log in, then obviously this assertion will pass, or it should pass actually, right? This element is pointing to the PIM after successfully login. So we are verifying if the data is this one and go inside the application, successfully log in, and then verify the PIM message. Suppose if the data is not valid, then login should not be successful. If the login should not be successful, what is the message we are expecting? We are expecting invalid credential, and that also comes from fixture file. If we pass invalid data, this is the expected data which we are expecting. So that we need to verify. In the else block, we need to write. Okay, so if the data is invalid, so for that, what I need to do now? We need to capture this invalid credentials element. So this element we need to capture. So this will exactly match with that element. Get this element, and now cy.get and get this element. And now this particular element should, and I'm writing one validation. What it should contains, it should have text. So the validation point is what? Have dot text. And what text we are expecting here is that also come from our fixture file. So what is that? User data dot expected. User data dot expected. So this is actual validation. So let me repeat once again. So once you click on the login, once you provided username and password, and once you click on the login, if the login is successful, this condition will be matched. That means if this condition is matched, means what? This is a valid data actually. If the data is valid once, or valid means what? It is successfully login. If the successfully login means what? This assertion should verify. Suppose if I'm not passing the valid data, and then else part will execute. If I'm not passing valid data, login should not be successful. Then we are verifying the invalid credential message on the same login screen. Okay, so like this will repeat multiple times. So this is all actual test. So from here to here, this is one test actually. So we are getting the fixture data into this variable, and actually the entire fixture data is available in this variable. And here I'm launching the application. Only one time I'm launching the application. And one more thing we have to do. Suppose if the login is successful, if this data is valid, login is successful, we are verifying the PIM message. After that, we need to come back to the home page to get another data set, right? So we need to click on the logout also. Here we need to add one more script, some other script for logout. Okay. So now let us do the logout process also. Let me first log into this, because once you successfully log in, to check another input, we have to click on the logout. So once you log into this, and how to click on the logout. So first we need to click on this element. And this is the element. This is, or else let it get the locators from the directly from the Cypress. Okay, so here I'm going to click on logout. Okay, let us try to, this is an element. So this element I need to identify. So go and identify this element like this. And this is an element which is given, copy this, go back and then copy it here. This is the element dot click, but this will not log out. Okay, this will just open the another pop-up window. So once you click on it, this will open another window actually. So that we need to handle. Okay. So once you click on it, it will give you one more logout option, right? So we need to click on that option. Inspect this logout. Okay, now this is a relative selector. This is very big relative selector which is given. So let us capture from the Cypress itself. So for that, let us try to run the test one time. Okay, let's go back to the this one. So if the credentials are valid, then what happens? It will verify the PM message and then it will perform the logout clicker. But this will not perform the logout completely. All right. So first of all, let's execute the script till here and see what will happen. So now I'm going to save my script and then go back to Cypress editor. Now I'm going to run data-driven test. So I'm just rerunning it. So there is for each is not a function it is creating. So I think there will be some syntactical error. Okay, so let's cross check what is an error here. So what is basically we are doing, we are cy.fixture and orange HRM2, then we are getting the data into the arrow function, then cy.visit, and then data.for each. Data.for each, here this is a syntax error actually. So for each is uppercase character, okay, for each. And this user data we are getting and we are getting passing everything. Perfect. Now let me run this once again, save and see here. Now it is launching my page and it is taking one data and successfully login. Now it is successful, click on the logout. But the option is it got clicked, but logout still it is not clicked. So we need to click on that. So identify this element, logout element, and this is the locator which is given. So let me copy this, go back. After clicking on this, now paste this and also click on this. Okay, now this is perfectly click on. So this is also, these two statements actually go perform the logout action. Okay, these two statements. So this is for logout. These two are for logout action. So when we need to log out, if the login is successful, then only we need to log out. So that's the reason we are verifying this condition. If the credentials are valid, now we need to verify the PM message is there or not. And also we need to log out from application if you pass a valid data. And if you're not passing the valid data or if the data is invalid, then this if condition will not match. Then it will come to the else block. And here it will verify the text which is present on the login screen itself, because in the login screen itself, it will show you invalid credentials. Okay. So the basically when you pass valid data, my login test should pass. If you pass invalid data, login should not be successful. Then only I can say my test is got passed. That's a negative case. Okay. So now my test is done. So let me try to execute and see whether it is taking all the data inputs or not. So currently in my file, I have 3 sets of inputs. This is a valid data, this is invalid, and this is also invalid. So 1 valid, 2 invalids. So when you pass invalid, the login should be failed. Then only my test is got passed. That's the reason I expect it is different in those 2 cases. Okay, fine. So now let us try to execute my code. Go to the file and save, go to Cypress app. Now it is started execution. So this is my first input. It is entering. Now successful. It is again log out. And now it is taking second input, invalid credentials. Now the third input and then invalid credentials. So now it is going very faster. 3 inputs we have provided. Now you can see how many assertions have got executed. So this is my first assertion for first input, which is valid credentials. And this is a second assertion for invalid credentials. This is the third assertion for invalid credentials. So here my assertion is got passed. Why my assertion is got passed here? Because even though the login is not successful, I'm expecting invalid credentials. That means this message is present on the login page itself. So that's the reason my test is got passed. So when you pass invalid data, I should expect an invalid credential message on the login screen. And then only my test is got passed. But suppose even though if you pass invalid data, if the login is successful, that is a failure case, right? So that's the reason we also covering the invalid scenario here. When I pass invalid data, we should expect invalid credentials on the login screen. But when you pass valid data, we are expecting PIM message after successful login. Now, again, if you go through the script once again, we are loading the data from the fixture file into this variable. Data is a variable which is having all the data. Now, by using this for each loop, we are reading the data one by one into user data. And from the user data, we are capturing username, password, and clicking on the login and comparing data is valid. Then go and verify this PIM message. And this is a verification, PIM validation. And once it is validated, then we need to perform the logout. Suppose if the data is not valid, if data is not equal to this one, it is invalid, obviously, then else block will execute. In the else block, we are verifying invalid credentials. So this is how we need to achieve the data-driven testing by using fixtures concept. So what is a fixture? Fixtures are basically files which contains a test data, so which we can parameterize to the Cypress test. Okay, and most of the times we use JSON format, and you can also use some other formats, like you can use TXT format, you can use CSV format, HTML format. So different formats of files which will be supported. But most of the time, most popular type of file is a JSON file. Okay, so if you have a single set of data, you can specify like this. Or if you have a multiple sets of data, then you can create a JSON array, and inside the JSON array, you can mention multiple sets of data. So this is all about data-driven testing in Cypress using fixtures. All right. So that's all for this video. In the next video, we will discuss another feature. So thanks for watching.